Okay, we're going to get started. So welcome everyone to Paradise Regained, Black Queer Writers Read. My name is Greg Newton. My partner is Donnie Jokum. We are the co-founders of the Bureau of General Services Queer Division, which is where you now find yourselves. And the Bureau is a government agency for government that does not yet exist, but this is the service that we provide. It's holding this room for queer culture. So thank you for coming out tonight. Yes, give it up for our readers. We're live streaming, so welcome to everyone online. Sadly, Pamela Sneed will not be joining us tonight. She's not feeling well, but we wish her well. Pamela, if you're watching, I hope you feel better soon. And but otherwise, we've got all our readers. So I'm going to introduce them. But first, I want to pass around a bag. We have a suggested donation of $10, but give what you can. And if you want to save that money and buy books, that's a very good idea. But if you can drop something in here, we appreciate it. And there's change in here, so I'll pass that around. What else do I need to say? If you're not already on our email list and you would like to be, you can sign up for that at the back of the room. And you'll get an email every other Monday about our upcoming events. And we keep a pretty busy calendar here at the Bureau. You're all getting a sneak preview of Satanic Panic, our new exhibition, which is actually opening tomorrow night by the artist Catalina Schliebener-Munoz. So we're super happy to welcome Kata back in our space. This is their second show with us. All right, so let me introduce our readers and we're gonna jump right in. So Jafari Allen is Director of Africana Studies and co-director of the University of Miami Center for Global Black Studies. His monograph, There's a Disco Ball Between Us, A Theory of Black Gay Life, was published by Duke University Press in 2022. David Ambrose Jackson was a Lambda Literary Award finalist for his debut novel, State of the Nation. His new novel, Unlawful Disorder, has been lauded as a cutting portrayal of the failings of America's mental health system. And Cary Alan Johnson is an author, activist, and Africanist, and founder of the Other Countries Writers Collective. His debut novel, Desire Lines, was published in September 2022 by Querelle Press. Please welcome them. And happy birthday.
Boy, this is so great. Thank you. Let me just say a couple things. We've got some other founders of the Other Countries Writing Collective here tonight, so I just want to make sure I shout them out. It's wonderful to be here, and the whole last month has felt like my birthday. It really has, and because I've been spending money, like a lot. And I want to thank Donnie and Greg for hosting this event, and I want to thank my publisher Don Wisey for having faith in this project. That's been hugely important, and being a wonderful editor. So I wanted to read something different than I've been reading in some of the other readings, and given that we decided to call the event Paradise Regained, I thought I would read a section of the book that fits. This is from relatively early in the book. Can I address this? Yes. Fall 1982. Yeah, let that sink. Right. From across King Street, the Paradise Garage looks anonymous and industrial. 2 stories with a bleak ochre facade, its large square windows painted over in black. 2 brawny Latins in leather coats man the entrance like a pair of bronze pit bulls. Welcome to the garage, one of them says with a Nuyorican lilt. Are you guys members? Zogby shows him a small wrench dangling from his keychain. With one of his massive arms, the bouncer motions us around a sawhorse barricade. Zogby leads us up a wide ramp lit only by tiny white lights embedded in the concrete. On the second level, a young woman with bright eyes and a ponytail greets us from behind a thick glass window. $8 for members, 15 for guests, she says pleasantly. Steve reaches for his wallet, but Zogby is already sliding 4 10s through the window. Thank you, the girl says. Enjoy yourself. At the coat check counter, a half dozen guys in tight black t-shirts are feverishly collecting jackets and bags behind a long, low table. We drop off our shit, stuff the coat checks into our pockets, and move into a large, high-ceilinged room. The walls are iridescent, black, but in some places they are covered with sheets of corrugated aluminum. Bowls of fresh fruit and punch sit on wooden counters. Phallic-looking anthurium, birds of paradise, and handsome gladioli pose in clever arrangements lit with soft blue lights. House music bounces off the walls, the moan of synthesizers, the throb of bass, the tinkle of crystal bells. Good-looking men stand in small groups everywhere I look, draped over sofas or gyrating to the music next to tall potted plants. The colors, the lights, the flowers, the uncountable pieces of eye candy. There's so much going on that I'm feeling dizzy, but I put myself in check. The Paradise Garage may be the biggest club I've ever been in, and the men are primo, but I'm no slouch. I already feel a few sets of eyes surveying me, probably trying to figure out what the configuration of the three of us, me, Steve, and Zogby, might mean. Zogby sees some friends on the far side of the room and ushers us over to meet them. Guys, this is Rocco and Rocky, Zogby says with no indication as to which is which. The four of us nod at each other in mutual appreciation. They are muscle queens in their late 20s, one black, one white, in matching white t-shirts stretched over broad, inviting pecs. With each subtle shift of their bodies, they flex and pose, drinking in silent admiration. They resemble a set of overgrown salt and pepper shakers. First timer, the white one asks me. I decide that for the purpose of distinguishing, he will be Rocco. Does it show? I guess I'm looking awestruck. It's like this every Saturday night, lots of gorgeous boys. His eyes quickly survey the room, then resettle on me. Steve moves in closer and puts his hand on the small of my back. Rocco drapes a Popeye arm around Rocky's neck. Everybody is staking their claim. Somebody is looking edible tonight. Zogby places one hand admiringly on Rocco's impressive chest and the other on Rocky's crafted shoulders. Or should I say, to someone's. Zogby is a sexy man for his age, but Rocco and Rocky are prime beef. If they decide to take someone home tonight, they'll have their pick. Zogby knows this. Flirting is his way of paying them a compliment. Besides, you can never tell how a night might end. Someone may seem unattainable, an icon at the center of a swirl of admiring eyes. But as the icon's list of potential partners for the night narrows through rejection or attrition, he may start to feel the pangs of desperation, and you can take him home. I've woken up next to someone I would never have considered betting before the drinks, drugs, or lateness of the hour had set in. More often than not, the hot boy turns out to be a dud. And the guy who felt like the consolation prize exceeds all expectations. There's a lot to be said for trying harder. The five of us stand around talking for a while, admiring each other and the crowd. Excuse us, fellas, Steve says, grabbing my hand and pulling me through the throng. Save me a dance, Zogby calls after us. Given the size of the club and the number of people who continue to arrive, we might never find each other again. But Zachary doesn't need babysitting. Dollars to donuts, he'll find someone to keep him company. Steve navigates us towards the bathroom. It's crowded. Guys are moving in and out, anxious to get back onto the dance floor. Steve pushes me inside a stall and pulls out a glassine envelope that contains 2 small squares of paper stamped with a picture of Snoopy. Stick out your tongue. I'm hesitant. I've never done acid before, and I don't want to have a bad trip in some big anonymous discotheque. But this seems like a night for adventure. I'm in a new nightclub, listening to awesome music and surrounded by attractive guys. I open my mouth, close my eyes, and lean my head back as he puts the tab onto my tongue with the reverence of a priest offering communion. He places the other one less ceremoniously in his own mouth, then pulls me to him, kissing me lightly at first, and then locking lips as we allow the acid to dissolve. I pull Steve out onto the dance floor. Using our shoulders and elbows to move through the crowd, we carve our way into a spot under the DJ booth. The DJ is warming up the crowd with Harlem River Drive. It's an easy number that pulses and propels in a relaxed, unrushed way, more R&B than disco or house. Bobby Humphrey's flute coddles the air, her riffs wrapping deliciously around my head. Currents of air move through the club, the AC, the reverb of the powerful speakers, the sweet scents of cologne. I feel like I am rolling alongside the East River in a drop top, the wind cooling my face. I move my torso left and then right, purposely ignoring the beat. All the while I'm rotating my hips in a shameless cross rhythm. This is how I like to dance. Swinging banks of light throw colors in long panels, illuminating heads, torsos, and the brown faces of broad-shouldered men. To our left, 2 Banshee boys in matching Lee riders do a rugged dance. One wears a wife beater, the other a canary yellow t-shirt that reads, "The heart is hard." For no apparent reason other than the headiness of the moment, one grabs the other and they share a tender kiss, crotches in hand. A light-skinned boy with a jerry curl accents every other beat with a thwack of a tambourine against his hip. Slim and beguiling, his tapered hands flutter, invite, and do everything a man's hands are not supposed to do. There are plenty of girls too, life model types with muscular arms and sleeveless blouses, big girls in black dresses, their waists cinched with thick belts. Some have brightly painted faces while others remain mysterious behind lace veils. A blonde in a pillbox hat dances resplendent in a tight bodice that hides nothing. 2 butches with tight fades and loose-fitting t-shirts dance slow and close, like the world belongs to them. The music speeds up, and the DJ slides Shalimars right in the socket, into the mix. More people insert themselves into the space around us, each effortlessly connecting their moves with the rhythm. The words all sound silly at first of the songs, but as I ponder them, they make sense to me. Sylvester's piercing falsettos shimmies out over the speakers. It feels like the floor is moving under my feet. I'm facing Steve, my golden-haired boyfriend, but I'm not dancing with him anymore. I'm dancing with the men around me, with the hundreds of Black men in this arena. I'm catching glimpses of their faces as strobes momentarily light us up, then plunge us back into darkness over and over again. I close my eyes, and in the dark, I can feel their spirits. Some are warm and some are broken. Others are cloaked in attitude and bravura. Their hopes, pains, and fears wash over me, leaving me energized by their truth, the rawness of their emotion. They all speak with one voice, uttering one single, simple word. They seem to say. I open my eyes and a sea of brown eyes greet me. I soak it up, needing this affirmation more than I've ever needed anything else in my life. I am close enough to the elevated DJ booth that I can see the Grandmaster's face, dark and impassive. His focus is oddly acute. Sweat stains his broad brow. He is feeding off the veneration that we are offering, like a benediction. He throws music at us in ham-handed fistfuls, songs familiar but reimagined, a soundtrack, both banal and laden with meaning. In praise, we throw back movement and witness. It goes on and on, this crazy call and response, like wordless communication between dancers and the dance, between us mere mortals and the demigod on high. You own us, we are saying with our bodies, but you must earn our submission. You are working us, but we will work you back, we say with our stomps and whistles. You are the alpha, but show us you deserve our obedience. Give us someone to follow. Give us a beat to worship. Give us something to believe in. We are still dancing. Some of us allow our hips to follow a particular instrument in the music. Others move in steady counterpoint. From across the club, a yearning howl is launched into the air above our heads. In response, a shirtless guy with long cornrows throws his head back, cups his hands around his mouth, and answers with 3 distinct barks. Oof, oof, oof. A yearning howl launches. Steve looks at me like I've gone crazy. His eyes have grown wide. He seems confused, like he has stumbled into the middle of some strange ritual that he doesn't understand, but desperately wants to. I can't explain this to him. And even if I could, I wouldn't. What Steve is hearing is a secret language, not the barking itself, but the passion behind it, the unity that it represents. It's a language that I have always spoken, but have forgotten or abandoned. But tonight, it is as familiar as any mother tongue. Keep dancing, I say to myself, struggling to keep at least one foot in reality. Reason is slipping further away. My body feels elastic and the club's roof is disappearing, exposing a deep blue, star-filled sky. The crowd surges and pulls Steve and me in opposite directions. We are moving further apart with each boom of the bass, each crash of the cymbals, each splat of the snare. Steve reaches out and tries to catch me before I am swept away in the tide of bodies. He extends his hands, but I don't reach back. I want to be on my own. When the swell ends, I find myself deposited on the edge of the dance floor. I will never find Steve in this crowd, and that feels okay. He wants a connection that I can't give him, an intimacy that makes me feel stifled and trapped. I'm not sure what I'm craving, but I don't want to be tied down with him or with anybody else for that matter. Not now, not yet. There are just too many fine-ass possibilities waiting for me. I look at my watch as I head toward the exit, 5 a.m. I'll call Zogby tomorrow, see how he made out, lightheadedly commiserate on his unsuccessful efforts to get the salt and pepper shakers into bed. Then I'll call Steve. I'll offer a half-truth about losing him in the crowd or searching for him half the night. He will believe me, or maybe he won't. I don't want to hurt him, but I'm not letting him get too close either. Maybe it's time for us to break up. Something about us doesn't fit. I'm as high as a kite as I step out of the club, but the cold air composes me. Other men are slowly drifting out, falling into battered cabs lined up at the entrance or heading to the Pink Teacup for breakfast. Some walk to the subway entrance for the long, drowsy ride back to Brooklyn or the Bronx. A few die-hard revelers mill about near the club's entrance, looking for someone with a wrench like Zogby's to get them inside. For them, this party hasn't even started. Libido charged and senses mulled, a gnawing in my gut propels me into the night. I follow the lazy diagonal of Bleecker Street as it cuts through the tangle of the village. At Christopher, I pass the 24-hour bookstore that sells dildos of various sizes and ethnicities, all displayed under a crooked sign that reads marital aids. I pass the trucks on Washington Street, a line of empty semi-trailers used by men for anonymous late night encounters. I head down into the meatpacking district, its cobblestone streets red with blood, bovine carcasses swing from metal hooks. A pig suspended by its snout grins as I pass. I walk until I can see the skeletal remains of Pier 48. That is where I will meet the sun as it creeps inch by inch through the naked metal and rotting wood of the abandoned warehouse. I will choose one of the solitary souls cruising for connection. We will climb the risky stairs to what was once a shipping clerk's office. I will let him swallow me while he strokes himself. In the heat of the moment, he will offer me his ass and I will accept. A few minutes into the act, he will begin to cry because in his own brain words, the dick is just too good to be true. When I come inside of him, he will pull up his pants and say something along the lines of, thanks, stud, as he heads back down and out. After he leaves, I will stand in front of the broken window for a few minutes, observing the morning through a tattered curtain, reveling in my city's brilliant, sordid decay.
Brilliant, sordid decay. Let's hope that was not my introduction. So good. Thank you so much for having me today. In many ways, what I will read is sort of from There's a Disco Ball Between Us, is about a disco ball refraction of what Cary has offered. And for me, it is also a wonderful moment to be in this sandwich between David Ambrose Jackson and Cary Alan Johnson. And as you'll read, as I read, maybe you can see more of that. The difference is that this is a book that was, that some people consider an academic book. It was written, it's on a university press, and yet it is written out of my deep and abiding love for my community and wanting to make a record of where we have been and perhaps a black print for where we should go. It's in 3 parts. The first part is called A Stitch in Space-Time, the long 1980s, and I'll read from there. The second part is called Black Queer Bliss, which talks about what people now refer to as Black Queer Studies, the academic enterprise. And the third is a conclusion, Lush Life in Exile. And I'm going to, because there's a lot of stuff in here, I'm going to read just pieces, if you'll bear with me. And before I do that, I'll do what I normally do, and I'll take a breath and hope that you'll take one with me. So. It's a big one. Joe Beam was my first. He was for a lot of us. But like my deep forestalled adoration, meeting his intense gaze from the back cover of In the Life, but never in person. His status as everyone's imaginary movement baby daddy would find him lonely and dying alone if his letters and the testimony of many who knew him are accurate. Here's a stumbling start to one story retold. In the harsh Atlanta sun, when I temporarily lost sight of the grace I could hold, I imagine it was Joseph Beam's voice that first called me by my new name, before putting his lips on mine, his hand in mine. Years passed until I confessed my schoolboy crush. I learned I would never meet Joe. He had been gone for 2 years by then. This poem is for Joe. Of course, Joe created the anthology that called brothers together, recruiting, cultivating, culling, and editing in the life of Black gay anthology. But it was also that skin, those lips, mustache, and dimpled chin. The work, the man I could become, and the one I could have collapsed and conflated with my nascent intellectual political aspirations, all libidinal, driven by desire, not shame. This is neither an apology nor a confession, and this author is not alone. It is more of a description that may make what Black gay men were doing clearer and perhaps also generalizable for liberation projects of the living. They followed Black gay women, lesbians, who had already authored the project and politics of Black liberation in the context of radical socialist feminism, but only partly down the road. And they fought alongside Black gay men and women who today might name themselves as transgender. All these folks are our Black gay epidemic dead and living, anthological world makers whom we refuse to let go. They also deserve more critical parsing and what Essex called ass-splitting truths. Audrey offered in Dear Joe that, quote, "Nobody here will lean too heavily on your flowers, nor lick the petals of a lavender gladiola for its hint of sweetness. But here we intend to lean heavily and greedily lick the sweetness. Here we are gathered together." If Joseph Beam was my first love, then Melvin's scholarly contributions prefigured what I would later hope for my own. GMAD was the first to invite me to begin to compose the self that I've come to cultivate in adulthood. GMAD was created in New York in 1986, the year I graduated high school. My first Friday night forum, which must have been in 1987, demonstrated to James and I that we were not alone, that there was a community just a Long Island Railroad and 4 quick subway stops away from Laurelton. Cue Shaka Khan, showed some papillon, were very young like butterflies, like hot butterflies. Showed some papillon, we had just begun. Like yours and mine, dear listener, Shaka's memory trip is induced by archival evidence. She cites, quote, "a faded photograph I mailed to you with feelings I don't want to fade," remember? And a love song of surrender in blue I remember when you took my breath away. I've already told a piece of the story, rhetorically stumbling, hopefully with a bit of grace, out of the blue-black club light or out of a Friday night GMAD forum to find what I may have missed from this moment of incipience. Still, as Colin has said, it is painful to remember too much. James, for one personally hurtful example, is not here to tell the story the way it ought to be told. Thankfully, Donald had already written this snapshot of our friendship when he wrote, "Shoulder to shoulder sissies on the crest of manhood, twirling like tomorrow is certain." My Paradise Garage debut at the tender age of 17 was in the 85 season, already near the end, one of the last of the storied clubs. I was an unlikely club goer. James, worldlier than I, first heard about it. He was much braver than I, but my determination to dance was stronger. The central question in Queens to determine whether one got down like that were not only who you be with, that is who your friends and acquaintances and companions are, but also where they are. If the answer was the city, Manhattan, you would be sus. In the Sharing Tongues archive by the London group Ruckus, one can likewise hear folks coming from the Midlands, Croydon, or suburbs to London or Manchester as similar spaces of temporary gay relief. In Paris, to be Black and caught in the Pigalle, or more recently the Marais before gentrification, suggested that you were in the life in some way. Among rural and observant communities, the very notion of a city might be enough to raise concern. After all, those individuals who offered cosmopolitan connection to the latest in music and fashion and literature might also be precisely the older men and women that you had been warned about. Cue the pool party scene in which French expatriates creepily watched Malians enjoy the upper-class ambiance in Jabril Jatman-Beti's Tuki Buki, a scene that seemed to be reproduced at gatherings I witnessed in St. Martin, Brazil, and Kenya some 30 years later. Still, I had to dance. The glimmer of the disco ball called to me. I do not remember hearing the instrumental version of Bougie Bougie before I stepped into the Paradise Garage. Listening to it now, I'm transported still feeling the fantasy. Upper East Side, Fifth Avenue with my friends, tea dance at the Pines, Concord to Paris, a yacht of strings is expansive. At 2 minutes and 40 seconds, the bass drum asserts itself before receding again for the 1-2 preparation for the hustle arm extension into a turn. We can thank Puerto Rican, Cuban, and Dominican dancers for the return to partner dancing in clubs of New York because they had never abandoned this practice. But my extensions, hip flexion, arms in arabesque, fluid with the music called for solo. Unlike the nasty, deeply libidinal bass-heavy groups that I took to so organically once Better Days, Tracks, Paradise, Tracks in DC, Loretta's, and Sugars had taken hold of me in the most elemental and irresistible ways. It was only my feet that had been turned out. In first position, extended, then twirling. Bougie Bougie has the most delicious, lush orchestration, elan. Even today, the flute sounds to me like a white linen suit with tailored pants and espadrilles, expensive ones. Oh, what wow, I imagine Sister Sledge dressed in pale pink Stephen Burroughs gowns would exclaim when they saw me. Was there Nile Rodgers and Bernard Edwards lyric, "He's the greatest dancer about me"? As my shoulders kept time to the bass line, my feet the drums, hands articulating and gesturing melodically. Or, oh, what wow, was it the men? The legion of finance dancers I was afraid to touch beyond the boundary of the club floor. Suspicious and frightened even of ubiquitous sweat. We believe, Nikki Giovanni, Black love is Black wealth. Still, HIV and AIDS uniquely challenge how we would love, under what circumstances, and what consequences might come. Returning to the night at the 100 Black Gay Poets reading, Carlos Segura's poem Classified, collected in the anthology, put middle class mask for mask dip politics right on the line, way ahead of AOL chat rooms, Craigslist, and innumerable apps that glibly provide headlines that anticipate the inevitable question, what do you like? What are you into? Today, the work of Fatima Jamal, creator of the film No Fats, No Femmes, calls me to account for a finer distinction between the making we do, the masks we feel internally and or are called to be by our communities, and the masks we often create for ourselves simply to be seen. If James were here, he could better tell you. Black gay men longing for a mirror made of flesh saw ourselves for perhaps the first time in the literature of the 1980s. But what of those reflections? Were they aspirational, honest? Were they just? And how did those reflections, whether honest and affirming or not, serve as Black prints for the movement fomented in tandem in organizations such as GMAD? The erotic is certainly constituting, but can also breed deeply consequential exclusions. The poetic brother-to-brother confession of Cary Alan Johnson, whom I first met at GMAD, and to whom I personally owe a great deal for his mentoring in the early 1990s, and whose human rights activism modeled my own early career goals. In Hey Brother, What's Happening, Cary wrote that, quote, everybody wants to be the boy next door and have the boy next door, and I am no exception. To me, this typifies the structure of feeling at GMAD in the early years. The fact that everyone seemed cute and educated or on their way, and middle class or inspired, was a lure and lubrication for sociality among those who thought of themselves likewise, and I am no exception. Tragically, this also proved to be a trap, or more precisely, a lack of political consciousness around what to do with this confluence of class, sexual, and gender desire and performance is the trap. I've often joked that in my early 20s, I tried several times to exchange my youthful exuberance for sexual attention from Alan, Donald, Len, all to no avail, especially Len. Our chats at Keller's Bar about his trips to Brazil fascinated me and educated my desire to travel. I thought about him as I found myself there some 15 years beyond that moment. Chronically unrequited as a lover by the slightly older brothers I desired, however, middle-class intellectual and political types at least did seem to see me. I'm deeply grateful to have been seen. I now understand that the failure to be recognized and affirmed results in nettlesome and consequential issues later. They still speak to me from anthologies, chapbooks, films, and fevered memories. Through watching how and to whom Black and gay communities listen, I realized that others' tongues had been sharpened, that Duncan's amethyst tongue had been sharpened through sometimes striking stone silence and needless exclusions. What I've offered you is a remix in the spirit of The Garage. It's a big book. Well, I hope I've offered you some sweet stuff in the middle. And now to David Ambrose Jackson.
Thank you, everybody. My book, Unlawful Disorder, focuses on the character of Bowie, who has been diagnosed with bipolar disorder from the age of 18. But because he is Black and because he is gay, instead of treatment, he's sometimes been funneled into the prison system and forced to engage with systems that he's really kind of opposed to. I've envisioned this mental illness or bipolar disorder as sort of a shimmer that he sort of sees off in the corner. And the chapter that I'm going to read to you is focused on Bowie and his boyfriend, Eden. But Eden is able to see the shimmer. So the question is, if this is a mental illness, how is Eden also able to see it? Repugnant isn't a description. It's more of a feeling. But Eden could think of no other way to describe it. The thing that made itself known to him. It gleefully whispered obscenities into his ear. A pus-colored drool oozed from its mouth as it forewarned him of things he could never have imagined. He didn't even have words that could adequately describe the abomination its mere presence embodied. They had vacuumed, rearranged, and disinfected the room into a modicum of acceptability before falling ravenously upon one another, saying things with the heat of their breath, the sighs of satiation taking the place of words. They fell off into sleep like two overfed lynxes. It was really Bowie that fell off into contented, chemically predisposed slumber, emitting that familiar rumbling snore that Eden found so comforting. Eden lay thinking about the documents Bowie had thrown on his lap, psychiatric histories, criminal dockets, medication regimens. In his mind, he tried to line up the dates for certain events, criminal acts with the timeline of when he had had sex with Bowie. He asked himself if having sex with him had re-traumatized him, if it had brought him back to the episode of rape by his stepfather. His thoughts all merged together like whispering voices. He wondered if having hallucinations or hearing voices felt like this. He remembered his father's erratic behavior when he was younger, how he responded to internal stimuli, and his mother responded to phone calls telling her where to pick up her husband, unclothed at the car dealership, or washing at the restroom sink, or carrying a briefcase full of newspapers, insisting that he was the owner of $1 million in cash and would be bestowing riches on a few lucky people at the local bank. And the calls from police, always the police, or calls to them requesting intervention, remediation they had not been trained to provide. These thoughts rushed around until they became a low whisper, lulling him into a light sleep. His heart rate and body temperature dropped as he descended into astral sleep, a state wherein he was aware of his sleeping body and his environment, but waking required a concentrated effort. It was from here that he could recall minute details from dreams, such as color or smell. He could sense himself lying in the bed, sense Bowie beside him, but he also felt light, as though his soul had floated above his earthly body, and that soul could feel the weight, the pull of that body below. While he lay there, he casually noted its presence. Above him, coiled in a corner near the ceiling, it began to slowly spin, moving from a pinprick to the size of a golf ball, then larger, then a baseball, then larger, then a volleyball, then larger. As it grew in size, the black expanded to include violet and indigo. The original black pinprick remained coiled at the center, up there by the ceiling, spinning, growing larger and morphing into an eye of vermilion. The largest outer ring of space fragmented into shimmering colors around the eye at the center, which slowly opened, pried wide by what looked like the searching legs of a black widow. The legs moved slowly, exposing themselves to be the curled tips of talons. They slowly grasped the edges of color, pulling them apart. Out stepped a cloven hoof with a matted hide of dark brown, as if some animal had crawled through the blood of some dead thing. Eden told himself it was a dream. He was used to this dream state, had experienced it many times before. His subconscious screamed that it was a dream, struggled mightily to waken the body. His astral body floated back, arms flailing as it pulled to the earthly shell by panic and fear. But even returned to his body, Eden could not fully awaken himself. He looked over carefully, not moving his head, and tried to rouse Bowie. He saw him lying there immobile beside him, his eyes glimmering, wide with fright, drool sliding from his slack mouth. 2 rows of yellow teeth, gums bleeding pus, filled the room with the reek of spoiled eggs. It grinned, pushing its sleek dark head forth from the shimmer, lowering, descending slowly toward him with the long, piercing peel, moving lower like lava from some vulgar volcano. Eden could feel its heat radiant like lust, pulsing toward him, drawing sweat from his frozen brow. His mouth stretched wide, pantomiming a scream that would not come. And the thing saw that panic. Like a flash, it darted out its filthy talons into its open mouth, forcing it wider and wider. He felt the dried hide on his palate, clumped and brittle, mashing down his tongue, pressing it against his teeth, pushing a weight that made him feel as though his jaws would snap. Then the head leaned close. He smelled its breath like shit as it whispered things in his ear, filled it with vile, unspeakable, unimaginable things. A wet, unctuous feeling clotted his auricle. Saliva spooled from Eden's immobile, slack mouth, ran down his neck, soaking the pillow beneath his head. Then he heard Bowie's phone charging on the dresser buzz, and the thing angrily snapped its neck around, searching for that sound. It turned its back to him, arched its back, then abruptly it withdrew, retreating from Eden's body. Eden, stiff with horror, watched the bulbous shaped head, the wide shoulders and narrow horned ass as it reached up into the shimmer and again stretched and pulled the vermilion center open. It created a space to let itself in, and then pulled itself up higher and higher until it rested on the ledge of the dazzling pinpricks of light. Pulling in its feet and dropping back, it closed the shimmer into the nothingness from where it had come.
Yep.
So I'm gonna be Pam Sneed. See how that feels. It feels wonderful. Thank you both. Great. So I will just ask a couple questions maybe and let the guys talk. And then if you have any thoughts or questions or things you want to ask. So maybe I'll just start by asking a question I'm often asked, which is, who did you write this? Who did you write this work for?
I wrote this one for myself because Toni Morrison always says if the stories that you want to read aren't out there, then you need to write them. So I wrote it for myself.
Because I'm perhaps less creative, as a creative writer, I explicitly tell you who I wrote it for.
Oh.
And it's dedicated, it's a 3-part dedication. The first is to our epidemic dead and the living, remember them. And that's a quote, of course, from Melvin Dixon. And to the children, and it's for Philip. Long may we live to free this dream. So it is to honor the past and those who allowed me and shaped me to be who I am to be. To the children, those who will study and carry on Black studies, and to my man, who helped me to realize the center of that dream, to be in relationship.
Well, I'm going to challenge a little bit that
Please.
first part of what you said about you're not as creative, perhaps. I have read parts of the book, and it's beautiful to hear the rest of it. And I think being able to write something in the academic sphere, something that has, history and anthropology and sociology up in it, but to do it in a way that is readable by those of us who are not in the academy, and that has these flourishes and these, flights of language. That's brilliant, and that's what I loved about, the book, and so that I think that's probably even more challenging than just sort of making up stories, which is what I'll answer the question for myself, which is that I had one person in mind. I had one friend named Reggie, who lives in Washington, and I just chose him because I needed sort of an everyman. I needed sort of an every Black gay man of my generations who I could say, well, what would Reggie think of this? Or would he be able, and I don't know if Reggie's out there somewhere, but he's been a real support to me as I wrote the book. So I had this one kind of person who was, but I also, that Toni Morrison quote, I was going to use that as the epigraph for the book. If something you want to read hasn't been written, then you should write it. Terrible paraphrasing something. But then I saw someone else used it in there as an epigraph for their book, and I said, wow, that's out. Find something else. Does your book have an epigraph?
I have two. One's Shirley Caesar.
Could you read it?
I just want to take the time to tell you a story about a man called Shouting John. Because Ali in the book is sometimes referred to as Shouting John because he is religious and he goes to church and he claps the loudest and he sings the loudest and he praises the loudest. So people call him Shouting John. So I used that. And I also used a quote from the Mad Hatter in Alice in Wonderland. If I had a world of my own, everything would be nonsense. Nothing would be what it is because everything would be what it isn't. And contrary-wise, what it is, it wouldn't be. And what it wouldn't be, it would, you see. Yeah.
Sorry.
There are lots of epigraphs, and the one that begins that precedes what I perceive as the beginning of the book, which is Joseph Beam was my first, is by Audre Lorde. And there's so much Audre Lorde in here that at the end, I have to say, I know that you're tired of every three words, but she's inescapable, right? And it begins, no reckoning allowed, save the marvelous arithmetics of distance. And so I'm there trying to think about how this is a moment to think about the long 1980s, which I go from 1979 to 1995, just to make a demarcation. And the arithmetic of distance and that we can now perhaps think about what that moment meant and how it is how it shaped what we're going through today, in some ways mirrors some of the stuff some of the foolery that's happening in national and international politics and this moment.
The long 80s and the long 90s. I mean, 2 long decades, you know. Golly. I have a couple epigraphs as well. The first one is from John Ritchie, his book Numbers. City of Night to me just was classic queer literature, but this one is from Numbers. Triumphantly, the thought of sex has driven away the thought of death, at least for now. And the second is from Just Above My Head by James Baldwin. I prefer sinners and madmen who can learn, who can change, who can teach. Of course, right? Let you use other people's language to, you know, to sort of intro your thoughts. So that's enough, I think, from us. Unless you guys have some questions, I think it's more interesting probably to engage with folks. Yeah.
I will say that the thing about other people's works is that one of the things that makes this different is that there's lots of other people's works, like long pieces from Essex Temple, Colin Robinson, and from Marvin K. White, and various people in the work, so that my voice is not the only voice in here, so that there are lots of voices telling the story.
Did want to say that something that resonated with me for both of your books is how you use music from a certain era to move into certain discussions. It resonated with me because I also tried to do that in my book, but editors did not find it as compelling as I did. And so I wondered if maybe there was a disconnect, or maybe I just didn't write it well enough to describe how much meaning music has for gay people.
That's interesting. I mean, what kinds of reasoning did they give for it not? Because I do a lot of pull kind of, you know, actually there were quite, even in the section I read, there were songs in there. I did not read them because I didn't practice singing them. And I've sung other readings, but this one I said, well, I didn't practice singing Sylvester or Tina Marie, so I think I would spare.
That's extra. That's more than a general.
It's more than, it's extra, did you say? It is extra, and I was ready to like.
Jafari did good.
Well, I bet you he's read that section before.
No.
Really? Okay,
No, I haven't.
all right, that's great.
I think that we're saying that we want just to. But I think that this is one of the things that I hope maybe shifts, right? Because and you'll have to excuse me because I'm just out of my hermitage, right? This is like only the second time I've been in a room with people, and the whole mask thing. You see, I took it off in a while, and I'll be up all night thinking that I have some terrible disease for taking this off like 5 seconds. But I was really fortunate to have my editor, Ken Whitaker at Duke, who understands that I'm arguing. The whole book is an argument from something that I call Black gay sensibility. And you can't have Black gay sensibility without it. You know, when Cary did this, there's always music, right? And so I did have to make that case, but I've seen, you know, as an editor and as a reviewer, I've seen other people say, oh, you don't really need that, but you kind of do in some places, right?
They were saying that it's just a list. You're just providing like the names of, you know, artists. Like, yeah, it's sort of a call out that was deliberate, but maybe everyone couldn't see it that way.
Right, and every work is an archive. I mean, and Stephen Fuller has helped me to understand that. So if in fact it's an archive, that what your character is going through and the names of those songs are part of that story. We want to reprint.
Stephen.
Desire Lines. Why did you name your book that?
Mhm.
Like, what was it about that time? I really love Desire Lines. I love walking in the park and seeing.
Right. No, that's it. Thank you. Keep going. Yeah.
So I was really enchanted by your reading. Can you talk a little bit about Desire Lines as a title and how it, why you decided to use it?
Right. I mean, do folks, I'm just curious, know what a desire line is? No, I mean, that's it. And it's when you're in any kind of a public space, a park or whatever, outdoors, and there are the paths, the concrete paths or the cement paths, but people don't want to walk on that path. They want to, walk straight this way. And so year after year after year, their feet like create these paths, and they're called desire lines. And I had no idea. I was in the park one day, and I saw this sign, avoid, stay on the path, avoid desire lines. And I was like, no, I shan't. And Don, my editor, I remember he because there was an explanation of what desire lines are, like way towards the end of the book. And I remember he read the manuscript and he said, oh, that's what, desire lines are. It's so meaningful, move it to the front. Now it's on the very first page that the narrator talks about. He sees the sign and it says avoid desire line. And I think that's what, we are always sort of challenged to do. Do we stay on the path or do we create our desire lines? Both have risks. Staying on the path is like, okay, that's what you're supposed to do. The desire line, like following it, you might get lost. You might, fall off the cliff, like, and the narrator does. He falls off a lot of damn cliffs through following his desire. And desire can betray us. We don't really always know what we desire. So, yeah, I mean, so thanks for asking about the title. Yes.
Happy birthday, Karen.
Thank you.
Thank you all. It was incredible what just happened to me. And I was really struck in all the readings how much poetry was embedded in everything that you guys read. And as I found myself moving with that poetry, I heard the music and I was taken by the kind of cinematic nature of every bit of it. And I was like, did any of you think cinematically as you were writing? Did you imagine not just, oh yeah, maybe this book could be a movie, but maybe even like sections could be short films. There was just something in it that was moving in a really visual way for me. And I just was wondering how that intersection of poetry, music, and film just seemed to resonate.
I absolutely did, because I was trying to envision what mental illness might look like. So I was envisioning, a shimmer of lights in a corner. And so I did try to do things that were sometimes episodic. There's one chapter that's only a page long, but it's a description of church and what happens to the body and the spirit while one is in church. So a lot of times it was all pictures for me.
We're all of a certain age, right? But we're all of us in this room, we're a product of, like this era of, where do any of us not think cinematically these days? Or, that is how we kind of consume. So many times I'll be having conversations about literature and, people will refer to the film, the movie about the book. As like they haven't read the book, but they've seen the movie. So I think, the thing of scenes, is definitely how I write. And, having been involved in theater with you, back in the day. And so, yeah, I don't know about like in a more academic. I keep saying academic, but your book is not, you know, I'm sure it can be taught in the classroom, but it's also for readers,
Yes,
you know.
readers, so read, please.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that I'm really happy and gratified to hear you say that, because the voice is not it's not a typical scholarly voice. And this is the voice that the people uptown at Columbia did ask me to not use academically when I was in graduate school, right? Because it is not, but because I'm an anthropologist, the ethnographic voice is also one where we want you to thickly be in the moment, right? To describe things. And so I think if I'd been in a different discipline, I might not have this license.
Mm-hmm.
And the voice that I love this book, and I'm proud of this book because it's the voice, it's my voice, and it's the voice that poetry begot, right? So I hear in my head, I hear Audrey and I hear Essex and I hear Pat Parker in my head, and those the timing and the pace of the writing is something that you would read in another country's journal, probably not in an American ethnologist, right? And so that's the voice that is really gratifying to me, to be in a company of fiction writers, because this is where I belong.
Yeah.
Hi. Oh, hey.
Cary, having known you for so long, this has been such a long gestation period, because I remember meeting you years ago. You always said you wanted to do a novel. And understanding the period that we grew up in and just the trauma that period represented, and I haven't read the book yet, but I'm assuming it's going to reflect kind of history of that. How do you, or do you think, in terms of making a connection with people who are now 17 or 20 years old, who are going out into the scene and having the foundation of our experiences and the work that was done? Are you, it's a two-part question, because first I just want to congratulate you, Magic, this. I'm so happy and proud of just what you've done, because for years you've been speaking about it, and to see the physical symbol of it just blows my mind. So that, I just have to say publicly. But also understanding that now you have a chapter of history that you've captured. How do you connect or speak to somebody who was our age in the late 70s or the 80s, and representing how you want them to have a healthy gay life?
You mean younger men?
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
and given the trauma that, you know, that period of us represents. So,
right. What is gained and what is lost? I have thought a lot about, and a lot was lost, and I have trouble thinking what was gained. You know, in that era, a lot was lost. But if I think about what was gained, if I have to like really put it, like find something, I would say it's perspective. You know what? I don't know, but I don't really think young people care. And that's okay. I mean, I sort of feel like, you know, every generation has to make their own set of observations, and you know, I mean, did we care? What, like, I mean, maybe in terms of literature, academia and stuff like that, we were steeped in this. But did, you know, when we went to a bar, and you know, there was some, when I was in my 20s, and I went to a bar and there was some 50, 60-year-old sitting on the bar stool, did I really care what was going on with him? Like, did I really want his perspectives? I mean, I was a polite kid, so probably a little bit, but I feel like if young people, I mean, I have young people in my life, and I hope they appreciate this and can find resonance in it. But I also know that every generation has to have their own set of experiences, rise and fall of their lives. And so I wish them luck. It's just quite the journey. I don't know what other people.
But, you know, one of the reason that the first dedication is to the epidemic dead and living is precisely because even though a lot was lost, with a, you know, just an arm's length view, a lot was gained, and the book argues that you all changed culture dramatically. That is before, and not to say that anybody volunteered to do it, right? You did it because you had to do it because people were, but the combination of saying the government doesn't care what's happening with us, the church doesn't care what's happening with us, and would even just have us thrown away. White gays don't let us in the bars without 17 different IDs. We are all we have. This has changed the way people do politics all over the world, right? So that people created their own organizations, people named themselves Black, gay. I mean, they had been homosexual for a time immemorial, right? People named themselves, people created, y'all in this room created organizations. And at the same time, even though there was great fear and great trauma, people were fucking and dancing and following desire lines all over the place. That is a tremendous contribution, not only to Black culture, but to the way politics happen. So one of the more egghead things in here is to argue against political science, which suggests great things happen in the civil rights movement, yay civil rights movement, and then, oh, this terrible thing happened between then and then now. And then there was this thing that was kind of like, what you call post-racial, but the 80s drop out because they've not been able to capture what was happening. And what was happening was sex parties while a sexually transmitted disease is going on. Really complex things. New presses happening overnight, right? Black women in coalition with Chicanas, in coalition with Native women, et cetera. All of these things happening was what was one of the things that was gained. And while some people just don't care, my students have this tremendous, and the other part of like using first names and telling stories in the book is there's a tremendous reverence for that moment and for those people who created that moment among young Black, gay, and queer folks and organizers more generally, because they realize that the politics that they are engaged in, the art that they're engaged in has a root. And they can't, going back to the Harlem Renaissance is cheap, but it was different. What happened in the long nights between, say, 1974 and 1999 was very, very different. So, when it contradict you to say, yeah, a lot was gained, and you've done a lot, and to see, for example, one of my students, Cary, said, found you on Facebook. Was like, oh, that's the same Cary Alan Johnson. Oh, and also like the desire story. Oh, okay. So it also is a Black print. It is a wish them luck, but also that they're wished luck by saying, well, there's a future. Could be.
I'm so happy to hear you say that, because I think that in universities, people, that's why young people are there, right? Is to sort of open their minds up and get a dose of history, and so yay. I'm thrilled that because like out here and things can seem really kind of rough, know, so it's wonderful that there is that environment and that you're there, right, offering these kind of radical stories.
Hi, first of all, thank you all for like really inspiring me today and getting to hear some of the process of like, you know, how you came up with writing these books. And my question kind of goes back to the first question you started off when you talked about like who you wrote the book for. And I wonder what the process is of getting to that point of understanding who am I writing this for? Especially when there's the audience in play. I know for myself, I'm a writer, I'm an essayist, and I can struggle sometimes like, oh, I wrote this piece and that audience responded to it. And then I write something the next time and it's in the back of my head is there's this conflict of like, yeah, but is that audience gonna respond to that? And I'm like, well, I'm writing for myself, but I'm also writing it because I want it to be heard and put out to the world and these people are responding to it. And then I'm in that state right now where I'm kind of like grappling with this, like, who am I writing it for? You know, am I writing it for that previous audience, for a future audience, for myself, or some combination of all three, which is probably the truth. And really thinking about what is my intention? What's, you know, as one of my mentor says, what's your intention in writing this? What do you want people to come away with? And I struggle with that sometimes. You know, going back to like, and also ego can come into play. Oh my God, look, I wrote this piece and all these people responded to it. And if I write this, what if nobody like reads it? And I want, you know, especially in a social media age where you have to promote so much, and I can actually see the people who are responding to it. And I'm like, great, that demographic is responding to it. I got to reach out to them, or I got to like do this like post, social media post that's gonna like captivate them, you know. And then I can feel inauthentic at the end of the day, like a sellout. Honestly, sometimes, especially because my stuff is about race, sometimes I can feel when I wrote this one piece and got a lot of response and from mostly white women. A lot of people followed me, and sometimes I can feel like a little step and fetch it. Like, oh, you're right, this, you know, place in that market.
I think it's hard to, at least for me, it's hard to stay focused on what my original intent was when I began writing like my first book, for example. It's hard when you do get attention, or when you don't get attention, like maybe you should change what you're doing or your focus. But I do try to remember that what I originally started was that I wanted to give honor to people who are no longer here. There are a lot of people that didn't make it to where I am now, and I just want to try to remember them in the only way that I can, and to hopefully then bring those people out into a larger world. Is just what would give me joy.
You know, I've been on this book tour the last few weeks, and oh my God, like this thing, like I'm like, it's like I have been doing social media, you know, intensely, and bing, 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 bing. Like every time somebody likes, you know, a picture of me at a reading and stuff like that, and it's maddening. And so I definitely need to take a break when this is all over. But I don't know. I mean, you know, I for fiction, I think I would be lying if I said that there was not recognition that I want, you know, and a certain kind of, everybody, you know, wants to blow up, you know, you want to be the next thing. I mean, I read with James Hanahan in Brooklyn a couple weeks ago, and I was like, I am not worthy, you know, to be on this stage. And some other writers who are also like, you know, pretty successful commercially. So I mean, commercial success is a thing, you know, that you know, sort of academic success, you know, the accolades. It's not real. But in the end, I just have to keep coming back, you know. So like David said, to like, what did I want to do? Like, you know, I wanted to say something about Zogby. You know, I wanted to make sure his story was not lost. You know, that was, and you know, that's what I wanted to accomplish, like staying true to a certain story and not pandering or, so you know what you're doing. Fine.
It seems that what your mentor said is resonating with all three of us about your intention, but also recognizing that there's something else out there. I wrote, so academic books are a little different. Your first book, you're writing for tenure. I did that, Jen. The second book I began when I was at an institution that required that the second book speak widely to the world, and that when the letter comes for you to be promoted, it should say that you were one of the top 10 people in your field in the world. Right? The field, though, would be social cultural anthropology. They don't write like this. I wrote that book. It was corny. I scrapped it. I did this one. And because it is a defense of the dead, because I was led to do it, and my gratification has come with audiences like this, and with people who are like, oh yeah, just reading a bit of it. But I don't know what to expect. And I know that I wrote it for us, right? So much so that the review, so another thing that's different in academic books is that you have readers giving you notes that you have to respond to. And one of the things was, oh, okay, well, you're calling Essex. Don't nobody know who Essex is, but it was important to me that first names be there. It was important to me that when I say Len, or that I say Alan, at some point you know it's Alan, right? But if you know, right? And it was a very particular, especially when I say dashing, everybody put dashing and Alan together. Who else could it be? Right? And I was happy with that, right? But then one suggestion by one of the readers and the editors was, don't you want other people to be invited in? And I thought, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. Right.
But then I wrote, some people would be really deep and rewrite the book. Instead, I wrote a 5-page thing called an invitation and wrote, "Dear reader," and just said, this book is written to, my students and friends of my mind. You may be one of those. You might not understand. Let it move through you. Whatever. It is what it is, and move on. And that was my offering. So I'm offering that to you as a way to say that if there's a way that you can do the thing that you're led to do, that is your intention. And then if there's just some way to just invite people into what you've already done, instead of trying to rearrange your room to make them comfortable.
Right. Oh, sweet.
That may be the thing
right.
that may be the thing that you're
right. Right. Can I just say, why do we have to spend so much time inviting people? I mean, the invitation is there. Do white male writers, invite in, Black queer folks or, women? I mean, I don't know. Yes, I want people to, I want anybody to be able, but I think they can. I think like the stories we're writing about, mental challenges and illnesses, death, illness, love, they're I term universal, I don't even really like this. They're human. And it's people's racism or misogyny or homophobia or X, they keep them. So like, this bending over backwards to, it's a question for me.
Has there been anything particularly surprising in how people have reacted to your work? Something unintended, that something that maybe someone else saw in it.
I'll only say when I was workshopping, before it was a novel. Of course, when I was workshopping, I was surprised that straight white males were the ones who were most responsive to pieces about, transgender or people living on the street, prostitutes, that sort of thing. They were the ones who were more responsive to the stories, and that was surprising to me.
What I find so fascinating is that people read what they want to into work. I did this podcast with these guys, and the interviewer was saying, "Oh yeah, what I really liked is the way the narrator, takes care of his friend who's dying of AIDS and sticks with him to the end, because this podcast because that's what I did with my lover. I stuck with him to the end. And the truth is, the narrator abandons his lover. He gets on a plane and I was like, okay, well, that's what he needed to read. He needed to read a story about, someone who took care of his, because that was his. So I'm like, and I contradict him. I was like, I'm glad you found that resonant. But that's what I think I find, interesting and wonderful, that people get what they need, hopefully.
I've been really pleasantly, the book has like reference upon citation upon reference, music and scholarship and poetry, and lots of stuff. And I've been happily surprised that people that bring more stuff and like, oh, isn't that what you were thinking of? Like, no, but I'll take that.
Right.
Also, just last week, a colleague was a colleague at something at Columbia was talking about Gloria Naylor and Mama Day in my introduction. I thought, I read Mama Day when it was published, and then did not, but she's right. And she actually read a piece, and it is part of like when you write, everything that is part of something's find their way into it. And that's been really surprising and lovely to find jewels in here that I didn't cite, but that are just part of my makeup, or part of the makeup of the time that are in here. That's been surprising.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
How do either one of you, how do you land on which music or artist you're going to use? Because there's so much out there. Like, does it come to you like a spirit that you should insert as a particular space in your writing?
Well, for me, one of the things is that was constantly listening to the music as I was writing, so it was there. But I also, it's not written as if there's an argument, but there's an argument. It's driven by an argument. And so when I write, 7 pages on Sylvester's "You Are My Friend," I'm theorizing friendship through Sylvester, right? And I want you to see how Sylvester and 2 Tons of Fun do it. And so I'm intricately talking about each note that they do. So all of the music is there for a reason. Chaka Khan is there because she's theorizing. She's theorizing something about memory. That's the reason that the stuff is there for me. And also some of it is because I began in 1979, and 1979 is also time that Chic comes out with Be Free, et cetera, et cetera. So that was a way to discipline my tremendous playlist in my head. And there's also a playlist that goes with the book that's free on Spotify.
Yes.
I want to answer that question too, and just say, was there a muse? Yes, and I'm not a writer who talks about muses, and but when it comes to the music, yeah, because the thing is, I didn't consciously think of this, but all of those kind of disco songs, they had a message, to give you a couple of examples. I did not sing these, and I shall not now. But Shalimar, right in the socket. I can't help the way I feel. If I seem a bit suggestive, ain't nothing wrong if love is real. Sylvester. So if I tell you that you're really something, baby, will you stay or will you go away? And then and then Tina Marie, who everything, she sang, I mean, there were messages in that music, right? And they were the messages of the moment, which were love yourself, right? And there's nothing wrong with us, with you, with me. We're here, that we're I would just drop these kind of songs in and they worked. I don't think I took any of them out and said, oh no, this song has a better message, let me put that one. No, they just kind of came to me and they fit in where they belong. Yes.
I'm curious, based on what you were saying earlier about the fact that you had some people that resisted to the fact that you added these lyrics into the book, and was a part of the storytelling process for you, and they were kind of like, I don't know if that's gonna, like, what was the reservation, and was that reservation from people who were younger than yourself? Because I know that in this generation, interestingly enough, it started with me. A lot of them are not into lyrics, which is like, okay, so you're not into messages, you're not, like, what's that about, So what did you get from that? Like, what was that about? At least from your understanding.
Well, yeah, the editor was younger, so I think that may have had something to do with it. And also that she was female. I think that maybe the music that resonates for me maybe did not resonate for her. Okay. Maybe if I'd chosen something, I don't know, more contemporary, maybe she would have seen what I was trying to do.
Evelyn Champagne King just keeps playing in my head after what you said, so I have to say, like as a theorist, and some of the work here might be, it's queer theory, much of it based on the concept of shame. And Black queer theory, it's not shame, because she already told us, Mama just don't understand how I love my man. She's not confused. It's not a shame. It's a shame that people don't understand that her body is yearning, right? And that she's gonna do it anyway.
I just don't understand.
They just don't understand, right? Or which I'm gonna mess around because that's just where I want to be. I got them all over town, right? Don't want your love, don't need it. That's the way I see it. Oh, no, and part of the thing is also to valorize and one of the things that fiction does, the imagination, you can see, or a quick reader can see theory happening as people are fixing the world in particular places. And Barbara Christian said of Black people, she said, my people are race for theory. More often in the figure of a hieroglyph, right? So that is that in the music and in dance is where you get this theorization. So all of these songs, while we're on the dance floor, they are telling something about what's happening on the dance floor, but they're also giving bigger instructions, ethical sorts of positions, right? Philosophies.
See, that's why you
That's
That's why you're Dr. Chia to teach us, pull all this stuff down into language that makes some sense. Thank you.
Maybe 3 seconds ago, but just what you said. Shadi Lithcott, who runs National Black Theater, and I was talking the other day. She was talking about the difference between like people ready to accept, Black dance, Black music, etc. But Black theater, Black writing, like that's different, right? That's this, that's not just oh yeah we feel good, and has a particularity to it and a message to it and a specificity to it that people are not always ready to deal with. So I just want to thank you all for being writers who are just, saying it in the moment and saying it clearly and saying it strongly. So, but it was the first thing first time I'd ever really considered. Some from Cary's world, dance and, you know, all good, but no, when it's the actual words, it actually requires you to engage with it in a different way. So.
Well, and thank you, Lucy, for shouting out National Black Theater, because my favorite part of Beyonce's Renaissance.
That's right, Dr. Barbara Ann.
Barbara Ann Tier.
That's right.
I mean, you know, Beyonce caught up, you know, like she samples everybody and like every music, but that quote from Barbara Ann Tier, and who was the founder, right, of the National Black Theater?
That's correct.
And
Yes.
yeah, and I remember when I first heard that track. What track is it?
Alien Superstar.
Alien Superstar. I was like, who is that? You know, we write. She's Barbara Ann Tier.
In a particular way.
We write we do everything. We make love in a particular way, and she's just so kind of like radical about it. And I was like, yeah, thank you, Barbara Ann Tier. Thank you, Beyonce.
Yep.
For, you know, knowing where you come from, you know. I have multiple feelings about Beyonce and her friends. Just not have to love Renaissance the way I did. Okay, I think maybe this is a good place to stop.
Guys. Hang out.
Buy books.
Yeah, bye.
Buy books.
And thanks